Okay, sound should be up and running. Let me check over here and see if it is working properly for everyone. Okay, it looks like the stream I'm on is not synced up to the pre-scheduled one. Let me get that fixed real quick. Figure out why this is happening here. Okay. Let me figure out. We are online over here. Let's see. See, the test worked all right. Let me see if I can get this fixed here. Figure out what the issue is. Okay. Okay, that should be working better. So, what we want to do today, let's make sure the sound is working. Looks like sound is good. Yes, I'm sitting by a fountain. Sorry about that. I'll try to speak up. It's not a flood, it's a fish tank. So it's completely contained. No worries. Is it hard to hear over the trickling water? Okay, but audio and screen is good. Okay, sound is good. Alright, I'll jump in as long as that background noise isn't... okay, perfect. Alright, so what we're going to do today, this is my first time streaming, so sorry for the delay getting this set up. We thought it would make sense for an art stream to kind of go over all the assets we have in and then touch on what the next steps are that we're in the middle of right now. So you've seen bits and pieces of the assets. Basically, the way we set things up, we have I'll pull it over, an SVN with all the files in it organized out, and we go through the process of uploading them into Unreal. So some of what we have here are packs that we've gotten through the monthly free assets, like the Locomotion pack that Talad was testing earlier on the CRAN. And I did a test stream earlier where we went through some of the retargeting, which I can do again real quick just to include it in this stream. Additionally, we've brought over all of the characters that we have done so far, and we have the structure set up for future character models that we're still waiting on. Inside each of these, we have it broken out. You've seen bits and pieces of these before. And we were just in the process of retargeting the null 3 or female so that we can include some of the animations from the Advanced Locomotion pack. So all of the characters are set up on the same skeleton, so they can retarget from animation packs from the Unreal Store. It's pretty quiet, but if you listen, you can hear the footsteps as well. That's part of what's in the Advanced Locomotion pack. So Talad can test getting those retargeted assets working later. We also have a few packs that we're testing out, like this pack was up for free recently. It's some really nice assets. Actually very fitting for Hydla. I can open one up and show it, but they're also pretty high poly, so we're doing some testing to figure out what works for that. So you can see it has LOD set up. This is really nicely set up, high quality texture. Looks like we're having some buffering issues, probably loading the barrel up. If I go in here, we can test the different level of detail. So this is the auto-generated LOD2 for far away. Looks perfectly fine far away. But if you want something really smooth, you can get closer up. This is a pretty simple example, but I could also show here, this is a nice one. Takes a minute to load here. Sorry, it was a last announcement. Since this is the first one, we're kind of thinking things out on my end. Now announce further in advance in future. So here you can see the normal mapping on the surface gives a nice sense of the bumping out of the muttons in the window, and you also get reflection from the side here. A lot of nice detail. And this is a modular pack, so we could connect them all together. This also we can run through the LOD. So if you went to the lowest LOD, it's actually still pretty high detail. If we went to a wireframe here, you can see the change a little easier. Well, it actually doesn't seem to change very much. So this is maybe not the best example for the LOD. So those are some of the assets that we're looking at. Things we have that we've ported in would include, let's see, the LeVar, which we've seen in the engine. We have the animations brought over from 3ds Max originally. And the big chunk of work that I've been focused on, we have a bunch of weapons in as well, which you can see over here. From the existing plane shift. The big thing that I've been focused on is bringing all the maps in. So the way the maps are set up here, we have an overall world, and then all the separate maps are streamed into it, which is going to allow background loading, which will be really nice. So it starts, once you get within a certain proximity of the next map, it starts loading the next one up. So it loads in the background instead of having a loading screen right when you get to the border of something. It makes it feel much more open. which is also changing the way we're thinking about how some of these are set up. Looks like it's buffering a little while we load this up. So now I'm in Iliacum, in the full world, but nothing is loaded, so it's just empty. And to load things, I can open this up. This is the tile of the world. So Hydla is right over here. We've been through that some. Maybe it would be fun to start over here in Amdanir and give everyone a glimpse of how that's looking. Okay. Make sure I'm checking to see if there are any comments or questions. Now that we're loaded, you see it saturates, so I can close out of that, and here we are. We were already here, so let me do this. Zoom out a little. So this is one map tile. Let's see, I think it's buffering for everyone. Whenever I load something, it seems to put a strain on it and it buffers briefly. I'm not sure if there's a way I can stop that other than having everything open beforehand. So you see from this overview, and I know there's a bit of a delay too. Hey Tua. This is a piece of the dome wall. The foliage is painted in as Unreal foliage, and it's also got all the levels of detail set up. So as I zoom in, you'll see trees starting to become more complex. We can change the settings. Also, I'm in the editor right now, so the lighting's really harsh. I know a few people have commented on that. I can run this on the client as well, which I can do in a minute. I can't do both at the same time though, so it's a little easier to start from here. So right now there's a big stand-in mesh for all of the buildings. You can see they're all part of the same mesh. One thing that we've been really focused on, which Tua did a great job working through, is breaking all of the background buildings into individual buildings, which is going to be really helpful, and I'll show why. First off, I can zoom in over the city, do a sort of a flyby here. Some of the textures, when everything's in the same mesh, don't map correctly. This is obviously not right. So breaking them out not only gives us more control over how the materials are being applied, but it lets us set up the level of detail properly for each one, so that helps with performance and optimizes. It lets us set up collisions for each building separately, which means we can be more efficient with those. It also means we can make auto LOD models using Unreal's built-in infrastructure for that. Right now everything's pretty low poly because it's ported from existing PlaneShift, but in future when we make higher quality models, we'll also be able to automatically sub in individual buildings where we had the previous ones placed. So what we have in Crystal Space right now is really just this area here, which you can see me outlining. That's the lower quarter. This city was part of a community contest, which I was in years ago now, and I've kept working on it here and there as I've had time. So up here we have the upper quarter with the wet soil mines and the bridge leading over to them. And then we have the, let's see, this is Rock Dome Quarry over here, and the Black Hole Quarry over there. And then this road is switchbacking down, leading to other map tiles. We don't have the map tiles in between this and Hydla modeled out because it's a lot of land and we want to fill it up properly. This is the landing platforms district over here. You can see the towers for landing on, with nesting for pterosaurs, Megaris nesting on the side, and then a bunch of warehouses and stables. And then the slums areas throughout this stretch, which I can fly down and through. Up on the edge here you have the magic shop, and there are going to be buildings hanging from the stalactites. I can show that in Blender in a minute. They're not in Unreal right now. So if we zoom in, looking at comments there, the water there is from a water asset pack. I think we can add more detail and realism to that, but I wanted to get something in to get a sense. And I have modeled out a river. There's a way to use certain materials so they flow properly when you stretch them out. But I was having some trouble getting it to save out properly, so that's a work in progress. This is the University of Amdenir. It's a piece, really nice model done by Balder from the contest. That's the in-progress Vigesimes Tower. Everything is UV mapped and mostly modeled, but there's some model touch-up I need to do, and then I have to work through the texturing. I mentioned the magic shop up here. One fun thing I've been testing, if you look at the windows, you can see the flickering light. You can do this with luminosity maps. I can actually open this up because this is an individual model. And let me go to the material. So you see there's a luminosity map for all the windows. This could turn on at night, which could add a lot of dynamism at night in the cities. And this is running through a blueprint. So all of these materials right now are set up as instances of a master material, a generic building master. This is another thing to help with performance to optimize that I've been trying to set up. So this little bit here is the thing that's doing that luminosity work. It's basically taking the coordinates of the texture and it's panning them. So what I did is I took a texture with, you can see down here in the corner, with a lot of variety and static noise. And then I have that, and this is from a tutorial, I have that panning over the luminosity texture that is input for each instance. So basically the luminosity texture is a map that receives the variable lightness and darkness from this panning texture over the top, and that's what gives you that flickering window effect really cheaply in terms of performance. So you can see that's set up on a lot of these windows. So if we run over here, this is, you'll recognize these are areas that are already in the game. I don't have the interior of the tavern inside, so don't go through that door. But if you head down from what's existing past the stables here, we have an open gate on this end leading out to the quarry up there, and this will be an open gate which leads up to the landing platforms district. Still some touch up as we're working through this. You can see the landscape is too high up, so when there's an issue like this, I would jump over to the landscape sculpting tool. I'll just fix it while I'm here. It's kind of fun to watch. I'll just use a sculpt, and I'll do a negative sculpt by holding shift, and I'm just going to sculpt this away so that it's not occluding the model. The tricky thing is I have to make up the difference in the thickness of the wall, because otherwise it would dip down outside. So I just have to make sure that it's happening inside the wall. So there are several areas where winches can take material that's been transported by the Megaris and the pterosaurs. You can see there's also some effects to make the netting wave. That's something that's happening in Unreal. Pterosaurs and Megaris can land here, and then goods can be taken down the ramp to this unloading area where winches can reach an arm out over the side and lower them down to the staging area. People can be working up here, and then another winch can get it down to ground level where it can be transported by Guja cart throughout the city or stored in some of the underground storage areas back behind. There's a really large area that's doing this for all of these, but there's some individual spots in between. This is not finished, but I'm working on Megaris housing that's like giant bat housing on the sides of the towers. And then you see there's some warehousing up here. These models were done by CRJ some time ago in the competition, and the textures as well. Really nice texture pack. It's really easy to make them whatever shape we need. So there's plenty of storage in here. We could have, kind of like in Oja, the different layers, different floors and platforms that things could be stored on higher up, could be placed inside as needed. That's something I haven't laid out. So you can see there's a big arching gate leading into the slums district, and then a really big loggia here leading down the side where you can have market shops, market stalls set up, or you could have storage, all sorts of opportunities there, some steps here. And then here's the market hall. Let's see. Next to some stables over here. If you look, you see the preview. That's because the lighting hasn't been baked. This is just a preview lighting setup right now. This is inside the market hall. Plenty of places to set up market stalls. And then that's back down through there. The slums up here, again, we have to place individual buildings. I can show real quick. If I hide the big layout, I've started bringing in the models here. So these are the cleaned up models that Tuatnaq, correct me if I'm pronouncing that wrong, set up. So you can see they have many fewer errors. There are a few places where we'll need to do a little touch up. I don't think I see any on this one, but there are a few that need a bit, but they're all in pretty good shape and about ready to go. So you can see that materials for these have normal setup, have the same flickering. We can change how bright or dark that is. Some things I'm going to run back through and fix the material mapping, like that tower or this platform. Let me turn those houses back on now. There we go. I also have a little Klyros farmhouse I made. Looks like the mapping isn't working right on this model, so I'll have to fix that. That was based on Inca's original concept. The thinking was leading up to the town there could be a series of terraced pools for fishing and for farming whatever plants make sense here. So that's a real quick overview. I'll go ahead and open up the Blender file as well. It's nice to compare how they look before we bring them in. So this is, let's see, let's just do a big 3D view. So this is the whole thing in Blender. you can see I'm in the process of modeling out the areas up here where there would be training to ride pterosaurs, training the pterosaurs, but it's all in progress. You can see it's not connected up. That's kind of just midway through. So one thing I can do here, let's see, and this is version 2.8, which I'm still getting used to. Controls are a little different. Let me see if I have any comments over here. Nope. Nope. Okay. Yeah, you've kind of seen all that already, but in this model, let me jump over here. Let's see. They're broken out a little differently here. They're broken out by material right now. That was for some testing, but the individual buildings have separate files. So you probably want to see a different city here. I can zoom into the trees real quick. You see the LOD changing as we go. It changes a lot right now. We can again dial that in a little. So now what I can do is I can open up world composition. We'll probably have some buffering here in a minute, so I apologize for that. Let's open up Oja over here. Oja is still in the process of being ported over. Most of the buildings have been broken out by now by Tua, and it's a matter of placing them. So let's get this open. So one of the fun things is once you load it in, you can actually see it. It's really far away from here, but you can see it in the world. So let's see. I say that. Let me open up. Very, very far away from here. Jump out a little there. You see it way over there. So that's how far apart they are right now. You can kind of tell that from the, if you look at this world composition, this is the Omdeneer map tile that we're looking at. So that whole square from the edge of the streaming bounds corresponds to this, really to the smaller square. The outline's bigger because the dome wall as an asset is bigger. It draws an outline of bounding blocks to the full size of the assets. If you look over here, that's where Ojaveda is. I always said it Ohavda, but I think it's Ojaveda. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the road over to, or this tile, and then there's another one next to it is the road over. And then Hydla's right here. So the winch would be on this side. This is the dome edge, and this is the cliff edge, basically, down to the next level. Then the bronze doors are up here, and the road to the bronze doors is going from Hydla straight up on this layout. And then Q Granted is over here. I'll go ahead and load that one up too. It's a little smaller, and that one's pretty much done, so that may be a fun one to jump over and see. Hydla's pretty full of content at this point, so it takes a little longer to load. Okay. Oh, looks like we've got a stray piece out here. I'll have to fix that. So you see Q Granted right here. You can jump over to this. Let's jump in to the city. These are some new stalactites I was working on making. The material still isn't feeling quite right, but I sculpted them out and baked out a low poly, so you can see those are still pretty high poly, so I'm going to work through building up LODs for these. So the way we bring a landscape in, we have the height maps from the previous landscapes. We bring those in. I'm using Brushify, which was one of the material packs that was free for a month on the Unreal Store, which gives it this really realistic look. And then once they're brought in, they typically have a lot of stepping in the landscape from the pixelation of the height map. And I smooth all that out. So I go over everything, smooth it out, make sure that all the edges line up and everything is easy to walk on and walk across. And then we bring in the foliage and basically paint that on. I can show what that looks like. So I would pick a tree and then I'd paint it onto the landscape. You could do a whole bunch of them or just one, and you can do a mix of different trees. So that's how everything has been set up so far. So if we run over here now, you can see the crayon houses for Gudrunted brought in, as well as the walk up to the city and the fallen stalactite right up here. And looks like my interior isn't loading right now. Should be. Let me see if it's off. Sometimes if I'm working on another layer, when I place something, it ends up on the wrong map tile, so I'll check that out later. You can see the guard towers here have a lot of nice texture from the normal maps, even though they're really low poly, but we're getting a lot of detail out of them. Now that we're in Unreal, we can push that detail up on models much higher. We have a guide to the poly counts for everything. But again, the first priority is just to port everything as it is so that people can get in and start play testing, and then we can work beyond that. This black street right here is because the landscape, it was set to a different layer that isn't defined for this map. So now if I go back, if I made this be, say, a sandy beach texture, I could paint that in just like that. And now, because of the way it's set up, the grass doesn't intrude onto the sandy layer. Doesn't have to be sand. We could make one for roads with cobbles. But that's basically how it works. Just a lot of time smoothing things out, moving them around. So now I will jump over to Oja. This is the edge where the map is beyond. We're still working on what happens to the landscape around it. A lot of this, previously it existed as its own map with no grounds beyond it, and now everything's situated relative to one another in the space. So let me zoom in. Again, the I'm just going to have to zoom in slowly, I think. The Oja assets are being broken out, so right now the basics are brought in, but there's still a lot of issues that we need to fix to get it situated properly. But you can see all these assets here brought over. Don't know why this door's closed. It should be open. If you've played the game, you'll recognize this. These are all very low poly, so that's something we can improve. Now that they're broken out, it'll be a lot easier to work on them individually and increase the level of quality for all of these. So that was what a coyotes are, and then this should be chords are. Just added some time ago. Some really nice, I've always thought they were really nice areas in here where everything's built up together. Some statuary leading up here, and then beyond this are the closed off czars, which hopefully we can work on once we have more artists. It takes a really long time for one person to build a city, in my experience. So there's that. I have new bamboo assets right now. I think there's an error with these where the base, the stems are made out of leaves, which wouldn't stand up. So again, I'm just running through everything as it is, which means there's a lot of rough stuff. I can show real quick. I just recently learned how to do roads properly. These I just did manually by pushing and pulling. Well, that's not right. By pushing and pulling with my sculpting, and then trying to flatten them. But there's actually a proper way to do this. You can use the ramp tool, which is really nice. And basically what you do is you put a starting point and an ending point, and then you set the heights to where you want them. So this one, it auto snaps to whatever the height is. So now if I press enter, it automatically fixes this so it's a level ramp, which is actually really hard to do by hand. So then if I want to do another one, I can start from that point, go up to here. I can reset it and just go all the way up here. So we'll have a nice even ramping going up. And I'll have to smooth this back out at the edges, as you can see, but that's basically how that works. Yeah. One other thing, I don't know if we've done much, but it's a nice thing to show, is there are other view settings you can use to check on performance when you're in Unreal. So I already used lit and unlit a little bit, and wireframe to show. Right now you can see it's really high for the streaming landscape, but that has levels of detail that adjust as you move through. The other thing you can do a lighting mode that helps you see the details, sort of like an ambient occlusion mode. You can do only lighting. You can do only, well, not only reflections, you can do reflections for everything, so you can test and see what's bouncing what. You can also do optimization views. So if you want to see, let's see, if you want to see what the complexity for the shaders is, you want to be over here, which is good. That's where we are. You can't even see everything. Oh, here we go. It loaded up. So never mind. We're not that good. So it has a little trouble seeing the leaves because it's seeing leaves behind leaves behind leaves. So there's still some work to do to get these better optimized. But you can see just an asset with very simple materials like this wall are performing very well. And the landscape is doing alright. It's a little heavy, but you get a lot out of it. That's part of what we'll have to figure out when we play test through and get a sense for what kind of complexity we can handle and what the settings are for that. So you can see if we jump back over here, uGrunted is really efficient. You can see the smoke particles coming up. Those are a little heavier. You can see how much of a difference the LOD makes. Performs really well far away, and then it increases as you get closer. So what I'll do now, I'm going to jump over real quick. Oh, someone asked about the trees. Oh. Okay, let's see. I have a few questions. Let me jump over here real quick. It's much more open world than it was. We'll still have certain areas blocked off before they're developed because you don't really want just open spaces with no content in them. So we'll allow access to things as they... Oh, UAJet already said that. Or UAJet, I think it is. Okay. Question about the trees. Yeah, the LOD will be adjusted in the landscape. Again, there's a lot of dialing in. We're not using SpeedTree. This is using Treeit, which I think I can pull up. It's a really nice free app for trees. Let's see if it'll load up. This is Treeit, so you can go through and you can adjust the sizing. You can add branches on, add roots, add leaves on the end of it. But the nice thing is it makes it really easy to export with different levels of detail for Unreal. And it also includes the shader information that Unreal uses to show the wind blowing. So this movement you see right now comes along with it. So what I can do real quick, I mentioned the retargeting earlier. Right now Talet's been in the process of setting up the advanced locomotion pack to work with our skeleton setup and our characters from PlaneShift. So what I was in the middle of earlier was retargeting assets over so that we can test it on the Null3 female as well as the Cran to see if the issues with the feet are just local to the Cran or if it's systemic across our whole setup, to see if foot IK is an option. So what I'm going to do is go over to retarget, click on the character I'm retargeting to, Null3 female, which is already set up. Type in the correct prefix so it's easy to manage later, and pick the destination over here. I've already set up a folder for it, so we retarget. Now it's done. That was fast. And I can show actually. So before retargeting, you can see here's the animation we're starting with the step sounds. And then after, if we jump back over to the characters, we have the transition that we added. Let me find it. There's a bunch of these. Oh, and the reason, that's not the right one. The reason that we're only seeing the head in the, that's close. I don't know if that's the same one. You see it properly retargeted, so the animation is mapping well. The hair is sticking through the body. So I'll have to look at how the hair works. For some of the longer hair, we may want to see if we can use a really basic cloth effect, which is something I haven't looked into yet. But it looks pretty smooth, which is good. Nothing's sticking out. One animation error I know we still have that I need to work on is the Stonebreakers are floating in the air, and I don't know why. It's just a little up in the air. These are old animations. These aren't retargeted from the same pack I was just doing, but you can see he doesn't fall all the way to the ground right now. So there's a few things to fix. The other thing is that the wings and tails are set up. I can show that real quick. This is the animation blueprint we have. In this, they're being blended in at the wing slot in the bones. So basically, the reason it's set up this way is so that the Klyros can use all the same animations for the body, but then we can attach wing animations on top of that so that we don't have to make separate animations for the whole character. And that works because the nomenclature for the skeleton is the same on the Klyros as on the others. It just has additional bones for the wings. Same thing with the Enkidukai. They have extra for the tail. So if we run over here, let's see. One more thing I can show that we've talked about but I don't think we've shown is the masking for tent, which I will jump over to here on the Nullthree. The Nullthree I think is the furthest along in terms of materials. Cyborg did a really nice job pulling all that together and figuring all that out initially and getting that started, and then we tried to standardize following that. What I've set up here is a tent mask. It's not on the face right now, but let me find a good example. On the torso, that's probably the best place to look. We have set up these tent masks, and basically what this is doing, it's I think it's called channel stacking. It's a set of 3 different black and white textures, which are compressed into a single texture using the R, B, and G channels, which makes it more efficient. And what this allows, with the blueprint we have set up, which, again, this is an instance, so we go back to the master. What this allows is to use the hue shift node so that we could set up parameters and say we want to have 3 different skin tones or 5 different clothing colors. And we'd use the same texture, but just manipulate the skin tone. So if I were to jump back over to the material for the torso and just do that real quick, if we want to change the, oh, let's see, looks like that's not mapped right, that's not the skin, but you can see the effect. You have control over how this works. Now it seems like there's a mismatch right here. So again, this is something I haven't implemented across everything. It's something we figured out how to do, but we haven't plugged in everywhere. But it's separated into separate pieces. So it takes a while on this one because we have to map it out for each texture. But that's a task someone could volunteer to jump in and do, and it would add a lot of functionality once it's mapped properly. So again, stuff that's not perfect yet, but is in progress. Okay. So I think that's probably, yes. So Talad is also controlling the PlaneShift official. So some of these comments are not coming from me, they're coming from Talad. The mask is not correct, that's correct. That's, again, something I made initial masks so that we could test how the hue shift worked, but I haven't gone through and made them for all the characters. Let's see. Yes, if you want to join in on development, you can jump on the Discord. That's probably the easiest way to talk to us. And we can help you get the SVN set up so that you can help contribute. If you're making art assets, you don't even have to have the SVN set up. We're using Blender 2.8. I'm using GIMP mostly for image processing. So feel free to reach out. We'd love any help we can get. It's made all by volunteers, and the more the merrier. Yeah, so I think that's a nice quick little overview of where things are. Let me think real quick if there's anything else. Oh, there we go. Let me see if there's anything else